Hi, everyone. Hopefully, everyone had this wonderful St. Valentine's weekend and took a break from the hustle and bustle and all the U.S. tariffs news or lack of news that has been happening. And hopefully, you enjoyed yourself this weekend, given that we're headed to this Family Day weekend. Well, where are we today? We're essentially in that area where we have to do some stuff and think about it. It's quite significant, and we have to think about what the effects are come March. So, once again, our eye is no longer on the beginning of February, now it's the beginning of March. You start to wonder whether this is a Trump policy of, scaring everyone and then getting concessions. So, what are the tariffs really going to be? We've already seen the China tariffs, which were not as significant as everyone thought they would be. I think Canada would see a similar thing. I mean, the biggest irritants for us are the aluminum and metals, and maybe some of the supply boards like milk that we run into. Energy, they'll be careful with because they make too much money from our energy products that we sell to them. They add so much value and they sell it back to us and worldwide. So overall, I'm starting to think our market will be in that 5% downdraft for Calgary. I don't say that will be the case for BC and Ontario, where the softwood lumber thing could hit them pretty severely, and other things like that. And if the auto pack gets hit in Ontario, it'd be pretty devastating. And the metal stuff will affect Quebec drastically. So those markets I would be a lot more concerned with because they are more impacted, or they are the higher price markets where a downdraft in the economy hurts everyone. And then there's been two schools of thought with regard to where interest rates are going. My mantra has always been that would be flat. Uh, that being said, a lot of folks say that the Bank of Canada may be led by the situation in Vancouver and BC, where if they don't drop the rates and people come up for remortgaging after at the COVID lows, which were 2% or less, to these new 5% levels, they'll hit their pocketbooks pretty severely. Like, I mean, we're talking in that 25% uptick on mortgage payments, although your salaries haven't increased to that level and you've been paying down your house. Because when you go from a 2 to, let's say, a 5% interest rate, your interest payment portion of your payments have more than doubled. So you're not going to see a downdraft. You're going to see a hit to your pocketbooks, and that'll affect your disposable income. It's going to become a more and more significant scenario now. We're 5 years onward. These terms, unless people ask for a 10-year term, which I doubt the banks would give you at that low interest rates, um, at the time, that there are going to be some price shocks, and I think they'll be in that, definitely in the BC Ontario area, if interest rates don't continue to fall. But the banks have been very slow in bringing down interest rates, although they ramped it up highly when the Bank of Canada bumped it up. But businesses are where they are. It's just like our housing market. Sellers haven't responded as quickly on the slowdown because of the uncertainty. Although this uncertainty is likely a 1 year event at most, as things get hashed out and people get used to it. So this brings to what are our numbers showing? Well, I'm halfway into February, the beginning curses of the spring market. Typically, we see an uptick. It has increased slightly, but our numbers are down to the 2023 numbers, not anywhere close to the 20, the 24 numbers, which were really high. And 20, so everything has become muted to some degree. I was going to say the numbers were even below what I would have expected for 2022, which was also high, right? So it's kind of like the 2023 numbers, but 2023 numbers, people took a bit of a breather. It's and it's not like the 21 numbers, which were still in the heart of COVID, but it's really close to those numbers. So it's not that what's affecting us is both just the buying public is sitting on the fence because they're worried, as well as we've had an increased supply. So we're on the cusp of becoming balanced. And that's basically driven by a huge uptick in multi-residential, which means although row townhomes are on the cusp of becoming balanced, the apartment scenario, we're definitely in that balance to buyer territory. So what we're going to run into is we're going to run into things where I see the apartment market being where you see the most downdrafts in pricing. And already we've seen probably about a 3% draft downward. I'm predicting that we could see 5 or greater for the apartment side. I'm still believing, because of this lack of supply, that we could be just balanced for the other markets. So that's where I'm at if you're in a buying scenario right now. If you're buying into the apartment condo complex, I would suggest it's a good time to buy. Right now, you could probably start to bake in a 3 to 5% savings, which I've told a lot of my clients, let's wait. And then if you're acquiring now, you will save some monies. And everyone says, well, it doesn't sound like much, but these are large ticket items. So on a $300,000 purchase, for instance, not to say everyone's buying at that level, that's a $15,000 savings, right? I mean, that for most people, apartments, that can furnish your whole apartment. So that's something to think about. On the sell side, as I'm going to reiterate my thought process on this one. It says if you need to sell because you want to move up or stuff, it's a sideways movement. But if you need to sell because of financial issues or pending financial issues, I would suggest accepting a reasonable offer on your home, not trying to be, obviously trying to get your best value out of it, but recognizing you don't be too hard nosed, because if that person walks away, you might find that the second offer later on that you get may not be as lucrative as the current offer that's in front of you. So that's a concern. If you're not you don't need to sell, I would suggest waiting this 6 months to a year out to once all these potential tariff issues should start to either be known, then you've got rid of uncertainty, or you kind of know where you're standing, right? So you might have to reset at a lower price, or it might rebound after a year once people realize the true effects of these tariffs. Because going back to the days where I took economics, whether micro or macro, tariffs are inflationary. Don't kid yourself. Tariffs are inflationary, and they're going to cause things to go bumping upward. That means the cost of construction, if you're using a lot of foreign products, will go up. And if people are trying to manage their loss of income because of inflationary increases, they're going to ask for more salaries, and that's a kind of upward spiral. And then you'll run into higher costs on the labor side as well, trying to meet this. And if you don't have higher side on the labor costs, you'll have a recessionary environment throughout Canada, which will affect people's buying power, and then thereby reduce the what they're going to willing to pay for a house. And that, when I say or housing, which means it could be anywhere from an apartment to a detached home. So these are some of the thoughts that are rolling through my mind. Business doesn't like uncertainty, and Trump and the U.S. government has been putting these things and kicking it down the road. We've now gone through a 2-month period of uncertainty, and it's muted our market. Our sales are down. They're comparable to 23, but 23 was a low relative to 22. It's not as bad as the COVID scenarios, but I could see this is in some respects being like a COVID scenario if these tariffs come true. So we're going to run into some really interesting effects in the next few months. Hopefully, this gives you some thoughts you need to think through. But if you have a secure job, you work for the public sector, or a job that you own a business that's somewhat bulletproof against economic conditions, uh, you should be fine in buying. But if that's not the case, you've got to think it through, because once again, a house or home is your biggest ticket item you'll purchase in your adult life. That's my belief anyway. Unless you're buying businesses, which is a totally different scenario. Otherwise, hopefully you have a great weekend and a great family day upcoming here. Hope to hear from you. Just DM me or send me a text or email me or reach out by phone. Somehow people don't like phoning anymore. Bye now.